Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Fro Show. My name is Frank Menken, and I'm joined by my wonderful co-host, Joe Murray.
Hey.
Hello, Joe. How you been?
Hello.
What have you been up to? How's your week been?
Week has been good. First week of holidays. Loving it. Doing nothing. Just great. Yeah.
Ooh, love that.
Yeah.
I gave you an assignment last week.
You did.
But would you like to remind the audience what that assignment was?
So Frank told me to go home and watch The Shining. Or not go home, because I'm already home. Watch The Shining.
Yes, I did. It's one of my favorite films.
Oh, really?
It is, actually. It's my top three. My top three films are Baby Driver, Into the Spider-Verse, and
Yes, Baby
The
Driver.
Shining. Those are my top three movies of all time.
Okay.
Also, I shaved my beard. It's probably
Yes.
something that I should mention.
Yeah, probably. It is still Frank sitting there.
It is
just looks
still
a bit
me.
different.
I'm just clean shaven.
Yes.
Yeah. So I would like your comprehensive review. Your thoughts.
My comprehensive review.
Yes. You just finished it, right? Like 10 minutes ago.
Yes. So
you're still,
I
like,
actually
super
just
fresh.
finished it. Yeah, well, I've sort of been doing things all day and had to leave the house a bunch of times tonight. So I sort of took 5 hours to watch a 2.5 hour movie. But, but I don't know if that made me confused or if it was just the movie. But I'm a little confused.
It is a very strange movie. I will give you that. There's a lot going on, and a lot of it doesn't make a whole lot of sense.
Yeah, like I really enjoyed it, and it's weird because I don't think I've ever watched a movie and enjoyed it if I haven't understood what's going on.
You watched the Jack Nicholson version, right? The original one?
Yeah,
Yeah, cool.
the 1981.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So from the top, what are your overarching thoughts about the movie?
Well, I don't know. I don't even know where to start. So, I kind of just want you to sort of explain what happened.
Okay. Do you
Just
like
because-
what's because there's a lot going on in the story,
I know.
obviously.
So,
do you want me to just give you like the general gist of the story?
Yeah, and then let's go from
Okay.
that.
So in The Shining, right, there's this thing that people have called shine, which is like a special ability that some people have.
This episode's going to be a big spoiler alert for anyone.
Yes,
who
this is
hasn't
a
seen
massive.
movie, by the way.
This is literally going to
So-
be the Shining episode. Like, I don't think we're going to talk about a whole lot more other than The Shining.
I'm actually really excited because that had a lot in it,
There's
that movie.
so much to unpack in that film.
Yeah.
So there's this thing called the shine, which these people have, and it's like a thing you have by birth, basically. And so this kid Danny has the shine, and that's like his whole thing in the film. And that manifests itself for this 9-year-old kid or 6-year-old, something like that, as like Tony, which is his little finger friend that talks for him. The way to think about Tony is like another person, but it's actually just the shine in Danny's head telling him what to do, basically.
Right.
So it's like his ability talking for him, kind of, is sort of the easiest way to think about it.
Yeah. Okay.
And so his father, Jack, and his mum, Wendy, they go to this hotel and take like a winter job there to take care of the hotel and just be like hotel stewards while they're in the off season for that hotel. And the hotel has a long history of people kind of going insane and killing their family and that sort of thing. So this is already a preconceived thing. Now, the thing about this hotel is that it's kind of like a hotspot for this whole shine thing. So it's going to be the place where all of these things happen, and it kind of, people that are susceptible and that are like weak-minded basically are a lot more susceptible to the negative parts of the shine, which is why Jack Nicholson's character goes a bit mental and kind of breaks down as a character over the course of the story.
Yeah.
Because he's kind of being overrun by this malevolent force that the house has, which is like, that's kind of what drives him completely insane.
Yeah.
And Danny is the most susceptible to this shine because he has this innate ability to speak to the dead and be able to see the dead and talk to the dead, which is why he from the very moment that he enters the hotel, has these experiences with ghosts and sees things and sees people and that sort of thing. So he kind of feels the most uncomfortable immediately.
Yeah, because even before Tony was telling him to not go.
Yeah,
to the
exactly.
hotel as well. Yeah.
So he kind of already has basically like every part of Danny's body is telling him not to go to this place because it's bad. It is inherently bad, and he's the only kid that knows this, and he can't portray those feelings because he's like 9.
Yeah.
And so obviously everything happens, shit goes down. Jack goes insane because he's overrun by all of these ghosts and stuff telling him to kill his family, because his soul is basically being eaten and sucked up by this hotel.
Yeah.
Which is why and there's a lot of theories about the film, because the film can obviously be interpreted in so many ways, and that's kind of just the general information that I've given of the story, is that he's like being sucked up by the house, and that's like full stop. That's why he goes mental.
Yeah.
There's a whole lot of other ones. The one that I personally subscribe to is that his like Jack's character is has always been the steward of the hotel. So his soul has always been the steward, and is just reincarnated every time that the family gets killed, or they kill a family, that sort of thing. Which is why you see him in the photo at the very end of the film.
Yeah.
At least that's my interpretation of it. And there's literally hundreds of interpretations to the movie, and it is so open-ended, which is my favorite part of it, because every time you watch it, you come out of it with a completely new idea of how the film is and what happens. But that's kind of the general gist of the story, is that the house is eating Jack's soul, and Danny and Wendy's character is the helpless bystander, and they can't do anything about it because he's like, that's his journey, and they can't really stop it without leaving the house. And then at the end, you find out that this has been going on for way longer than Jack's let on, because he's like disabled the snowcat and made sure that they can't leave. He's what's the other one he's done? He's taken the batteries out of the radio, which you see on screen. Like, he's done all these things pre-planned days in advance before the actual like murderous rampage. And he's been going mental this entire time, but he's been able to kind of push it back and hide it. And you can see that he's been kind of slowly descending into madness this whole time because of the pages that he was writing, of like, all work and no play makes Jack a dull boy, for the whole book. That's like that's the way that to show that he's been slowly descending into madness this entire time. And there's been no signs of it up until that point where he has that argument with Wendy for coming in while he's working.
Yeah.
Now the ending is obviously one that, depending on your outlook, leaves something to be desired. In that they kind of chase each other into the maze, and Danny outsmarts Jack, and Jack freezes to death, and then they escape, and that's the end of the film.
Yeah. When I finished that, I was like, I was not expecting them to live. Like, no way.
Yeah, exactly. And even like that, it's a really interesting ending, I think. And they did shoot an extra scene, actually, after that, a scene of them recovering in hospital, but Kubrick decided not to put that scene in because he thought that the open-endedness of the ending was a lot more effective than showing them recovering in a hospital bed.
Right.
And I'm the first time I saw it, I wasn't too keen on the ending, and I didn't really love it. Yeah. Having watched it again, like last week, in preparation for this episode, what I found really interesting was that I liked the ending a lot more, having watched it a second time and being able to pick up on all the tiny little details of the movie.
Yeah.
In particular, that whole scene through the maze where Danny outsmarts Jack by going back in his steps and hiding. I didn't really get the first time I watched it why Jack couldn't just leave the maze. Which didn't really make sense to me. But then the more that I thought about it, the more that I realized that, like, well, he's manic, he's insane, he's crazy, he just has a thirst for blood, and that's it. And he's not thinking other than that. So he's just like a wild animal, basically, which is what I feel like the movie's trying to portray in that section. But does that kind of give you a better idea of the story as a whole?
Yeah, it does.
Yeah. So what did you think of the actual film, like as a film, not as a story?
As a film, I don't know if it's because it's an older film or I guess the way it was put together, it felt really clunky, I guess, at the beginning, and it felt like diary entries. So I'm guessing it's meant to be like that. But yeah, so through the beginning, I was kind of like, it just wasn't flowing very well in my head.
Yeah, and I think that's also because it kind of jumps a lot in time. It doesn't stick to one like length of time where it's like 2 days, then 2 days, then 2 days. It's like a day and a month, and then they're at the hotel.
Yeah. So, yeah, that perception of time was a bit.
I think I think that's what makes the film so good, though, is that it burns so slowly. Like the action doesn't happen until you're like an hour and 45 minutes into the movie. Like there's so much setup and there's so much time for you to start caring about these characters and to genuinely be afraid of everything that's in the hotel. You see so much stuff happen and you have no explanation to it, so you're genuinely afraid of what's behind every corner, which I think is really interesting.
Yeah. I was just really confused with like when you were talking about how the house was like the thing that was sort of eating away at Jack. That cleared a lot up because I was confused as to when he was seeing like the party happening and things like that. I didn't know if that was his head or but then he says the house. So
well, I think there's one really small detail that that kind of flips that switch from it being all in his head to being a physical thing of the house is when Wendy locks him in the freezer and he gets let out by a ghost.
Oh, yeah.
Because the ghost is the one that's talking to him and is like, well, you failed in what you said you were going to do. And he says, give me one more chance. And then the ghost unlocks the door and opens it for him. So the house is actively trying to get Jack to do this, to kill his family, because that's what the house does. The house, the whole thing of the house is that it feeds on fear, and it feeds on fear is basically the biggest part of it. So by forcing these people to be so afraid in the house, it gets once a year it gets to eat is the easiest way for me to think about it.
Yeah, right. Then so that other guy, the cook.
Yes.
So he comes back later in the movie and sort of tries to save him.
Axed in the chest, yeah.
Yeah, what the heck?
Yeah.
But he has the shine or whatever. He's similar to to Danny. I'm like, is there any explanations around why he hasn't gone insane, or why he's still there, or why he didn't warn them? Or...
Well, it's the same. It's the same thing as Danny. Like by having the shine, they can kind of contextualize what's happening. Right. So Danny can interact with and talk to these people and know that they're ghosts, whereas because Jack doesn't have the shine, or at least isn't aware that he has the shine, he can't interact with them and he can't talk to them. So he kind of gets this overwhelming feeling that this is what he has to do, and this is what he's being told to do, which is what kind of drives him into madness. Whereas Danny and Tony can kind of justify it and be like, oh, like what Tony says, they're just pictures in a book, they're not real. Like that they can't interact with me, I can't do anything unless I let them interact with me.
Right.
Which is why I think Tony is so chill with it. But yeah. I think it's really interesting that you bring up Tony, because I feel like that's something that a lot of people miss, is how important his character actually is in informing Danny that he has this ability and that it's not just something crazy going on in his head.
Wait, is that character's name Tony, like the cook?
Yeah.
Oh, so that's what's in his head.
Oh, it might be. I might be wrong there, sorry.
I was going to say, is like Tony...
No, they're not the same. They're not the same thing. They're definitely not the same thing. Let me check what that guy's name.
I was going to say.
Sorry, his name's Dick. His name's Dick Halloran.
Right. Okay.
Sorry, I just said Tony brain fart. But yeah, I think he's a really important character, and he becomes a lot more important in the sequel as well, because even though he's dead, he comes back to Danny and kind of talks Danny through his whole life, like kind of explains what The Shining is and that sort of thing. So he really helps him in the sequel.
Right.
Which, if you get time to watch, we can talk about next week. But
Yeah, I think I might need to do that.
because Doctor Sleep came out last year, I think, or this year, started this year. And that, having watched that movie and then coming back to The Shining, cleared so much up. Like,
okay.
Everything makes so much more sense. You get so much more context for everything. And The Shining is a fantastic film in and of its own. But watching Doctor Sleep kind of gives you the context for everything else that doesn't really make sense in the first movie.
Okay.
But what do you, like, do you have any other thoughts about the movie? Anything you, like, found interesting or, like, didn't really understand?
Well, I guess being a music nerd, I listened to the music. It was really interesting, especially the way it was used at the beginning, like the first half of the movie.
Before you continue, The Shining is actually very, very well respected and gets a lot of praise for its use of sound and music.
There you go.
But carry on.
I can see why, because it's sort of, it's very different to other movies of that genre that I've seen. Especially the way it uses it in the first half, where there's not heaps of action happening and there's not heaps of, I guess, scary things happening. But there's still like a build up of suspense and maybe some really high strings, or something happening, heartbeats, or and then nothing happens. It kind of just leads up to nothing.
Yeah.
So
it's super effective, isn't it?
It is, because you're sitting there like, oh no, something's going to happen.
I think the best example of that is the scene where Danny is kind of pedaling around and he gets to room 237 and he goes to open the door and then goes, nah, and then he leaves.
Yeah.
That was...
What the heck?
Yeah, and you're so tense and you don't know why until you're like, oh, it's the music.
Yeah. Oh, man. And I think there was another one. There's one I can remember where it sort of built up. I don't remember what it was, but then he like just pulled a piece of paper out of the typewriter, and that was sort of the climax.
Yeah.
And it was like...
Yeah, it's a really interesting way of using like climaxes in music, isn't it?
Yeah, it's kind of like it doesn't just try and build it for that scene. It just keeps trying to build it the whole movie.
Yeah,
sort of
and I think that's one of the things that the film deserves so much credit for, is that it is constantly building. It's not like... I've never watched a horror movie like it where, well, I wouldn't technically classify The Shining as a horror movie, but that's a different conversation.
No.
We'll come back to that. But if we're calling it a horror movie, which it definitely was back in 1980 when it came out, every other horror movie has climaxes and dips and climaxes and dips. And it's like, it's a constant up and down of roller coaster of tension. Whereas The Shining is constantly rising and it never dips. So the whole time you're on edge. Did you have the same sort of experience with it?
Yeah, completely. Thinking of another movie like The Conjuring or something, it's sort of, it reminds me of the sort of short story timeline that you'd use in school, how it's like a little climax at the beginning, then dips down and then sort of leads up to a big bit at the end. Yeah. And so, I remember the scene at the beginning and then it sort of dies in the middle and there's a few little peaks, but then a massive bit at the end. But The Shining was kind of just like a straight line up.
Yeah. And I've never seen a movie like that. You're right. It does feel like a straight line up. It feels like a massive 2-hour roller coaster for one giant dip. Yeah. Which is just insane. And it's a testament to Stanley Kubrick's filmmaking techniques. Yeah. It's insane.
And it's not even like, I guess, the same things sort of happening over and over again to make it bigger. It's all different and it's still all telling a story. Yeah. And it sort of just blew my mind. Yeah.
One thing and it's a discussion that comes up very often with The Shining, and it's one that I find really difficult, is trying to categorize The Shining as a genre. Yeah. Because it's not a horror movie and it's not a thriller and it's not a drama. It's some mix of all three, and I never know how to describe it to people.
Yeah, I like Googled it just to see what, you know, Wikipedia said, sort of thing. And like there was probably 4 or 5 different things that popped up.
Yeah,
and
right.
one was probably the best way that I think I could describe it. It was a psychological horror.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh yeah, okay, maybe psychological horror / thriller or something.
Yeah,
I
I'd say
don't know.
psychological horror thriller.
Yeah.
Thriller.
And then but then another thing said it's a drama, romance, horror, and think, oh man.
Yeah,
So
there's so
yeah.
many layers to it that it becomes really difficult to categorize. Because there's just so much going on through the whole film.
Yeah.
Yeah, it goes from genre to genre. I'm going to ask you a very difficult question.
Okay.
What would you say is your favorite scene?
Oh man.
Because it's a movie that you can pick apart so distinctly.
Yeah.
Because each and that's one of my that's what makes it one of my favorite films. And it's the same thing with my other 2 favorite films of all time, is that every single scene is memorable. There is not a single scene where you're sitting where you wouldn't remember it. And it makes a movie like this so easy to talk about, because you mention a scene and everyone goes, "Oh yeah, I remember that," even if they like have only seen it once. That being said, do you have a favorite scene?
I don't know. Maybe I kind of liked that the argument that Jack and Wendy had, where he sort of tells her that he's going to kill her. Like that whole switch from, you know, what are you doing? And like, well, she's just read the whole thing and she's sort of freaking out. And then he's like, what are you doing? And he starts talking to her really lovingly. And then all of a sudden it's like, okay, I'm going to kill you.
The one where she has the bat up the stairs and stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah. That is an incredible scene.
Yeah.
That's also my favorite scene. Interestingly enough. Yeah.
Yeah.
Just
I don't know.
the change, just the whole range of emotions through that whole scene is just incredible.
Yeah.
Going from like the realization of his writing to like the manic insanity of Jack's character.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I don't know if you remember much about how that was filmed. I don't know how much research you've done on how that's filmed, that scene, but it looked like it was like his part and her part were 2 different takes. You're smiling. Were they?
I am smiling because you've actually getting very close to one of the things that I was going to talk about after we had our general discussion, because I have a list of a whole lot of really, really interesting things about this film.
Oh, yeah, okay.
But I'll jump into one of them now.
Yeah.
So Stanley Kubrick was a madman, like an insane director, and that's what made his film so incredible.
Right.
Now, one of the kind of very unsavory things that he did throughout his career was his mistreatment of Shelley Duvall, who played Wendy in The Shining.
Right.
And he was very emotionally manipulative towards her through the whole shooting of the film, which took 5 years, by the way.
Oh, really?
It took ages. Yeah. Took so long.
Like
that's from pre-production to final shooting, but
okay.
but ages. And he's famous for incredibly long shooting schedules and an insane amount of takes. And he really pushed Shelley Duvall throughout the whole film to actually reach that level of manic insanity and to be genuinely afraid. And so he would do things like on set, he would tell other people like, "Oh, don't listen to her, don't talk to her, don't pay her any attention," that sort of thing. Like when they were about to do that sort of thing, that sort of scene. So I'll just read. I have a quote here. To help her get into Wendy Torrance's frame of mind, Kubrick was exceptionally mean to her, isolated her, and made her also do countless takes. At one point, the actress lost clumps of hair from the stress of filming.
Whoa.
Yeah, so like genuinely incredibly intense.
Yeah.
And that scene, and it's arguably it's what makes the scene so good. That scene of them going up the staircase with the bat was shot 127 times.
What the heck?
Yeah, which is just insane. Which is why she's so manic and insane the whole time.
Oh my goodness.
And that's kind of why it feels like several different takes, because it probably is. It probably is a lot of different takes of Jack, and then one long take of her when she's actually manic and insane.
Right.
Wow.
Wow.
That's probably what you were picking up on there.
Yeah, so like to me it felt like the way that the cameras were off, normally or in more recent movies I guess, they've had, if it's two people sort of facing each other, they would have the camera, I don't know, one would be behind one's shoulder and then the other, I think.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's like that.
Yeah, or it's one is in front and it like left and right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But this one, it was like you're seeing her through Jack's eyes, and then you're seeing Wendy through.
Yeah, and it's incredibly effective, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I was kind of just like, wow.
The
way
cinematography
really
of that film is insane. It's and that's one of those things that you can keep coming back to because there's so much to unpack.
Yeah.
And there's so much subtlety in the whole film. One of the things that a lot of people come back to in the film, where they say, "Oh, the movie doesn't make sense. It's stupid. It doesn't make sense." Is the bit near the end where Wendy is running through the hotel, and she sees the guy in the bear costume.
Yeah. Oh, okay. What?
Okay.
What is that? Because wait, we don't ever see that again.
You never
do we?
see it again. You've never seen it before it. And it's one of those really, really subtle things that is incredibly confusing if you don't know what's going on.
Yeah, but before you go on, I think in this whole movie, I probably said "what the heck" like 27 times, and 20 of them would have been in the last like 15 minutes of the movie.
And that's very consciously done by Kubrick. Like that's the whole point, because it's and the whole point of that is to kind of put you in the shoes of what Wendy's feeling of like, this is insane. I can't believe this is happening. Like I don't like, you also would have no idea what's going on. And that's why there's so much random shit just put throughout the movie, because it's like, it's just to make you unsettled. However, that bear thing is a motif throughout the whole film. You just don't notice it, which is really, really interesting. One of the opening shots of the scene, I think it's the first time you see Danny, is him lying down in bed. He's lying on a giant stuffed bear. Then the camera zooms out later through their house, and on their fridge is a bunch of stickers of bears.
What?
And you see it a couple more times throughout the film, and it's just a subtle thing that shows that Danny is so incredibly connected to this shine and this place that he has manifested it in his own life. And he was always going to be drawn here. And Kubrick was incredibly well known for those tiny, tiny little details.
Yeah. Wow. That like blows my mind a bit.
Yeah, a little bit, right? It's a bit mental. Yeah. Do you have anything else you wanna talk about with the movie before I get into my long list of stuff? Because I actually have a lot of stuff, but I enjoy talking about this movie. If you haven't noticed.
Yeah. No, oh man. It's just, so much that happened. Because I literally just watched it, like just finished it before we started talking.
Yeah.
It's kind of all just sort of, crazy in my head.
Yeah, it's still kind of falling into place.
Yeah. I don't know.
All right. Well, I might just slowly get into my list, and like, feel free to jump in whenever. Like, there's honestly so much to talk about with this movie. We could fill like 3 episodes with just this movie.
Yeah.
But we're limiting it to 1.
Yes. For now at least.
For now at least, unless we really fall into the rabbit hole and this becomes the Shining podcast, which is totally doable, by the way. There's so much to talk about. Anyway, one thing that's really interesting, speaking about Stanley Kubrick's attention to detail, coming straight off that bear thing, is there's tiny details throughout the entire film, kind of hinting towards Jack's fate and the family's fate, that sort of thing. One of the big ones is Jack's tie in his very first interview at the hotel.
Okay.
Yeah, it's really strange, right? You would never look at it. You would never even pay attention to it.
No. But...
Jack's tie is a green and black tie in the shape of a hedge maze.
No.
So
now I remember that.
Right from the very beginning of the film, you're told what Jack's fate is. And it's just that sort of thing is just scattered throughout the entire movie. time and time again, you see tiny little things of like, oh, that's how the movie ends.
Wow.
Yeah, honestly, I would really recommend you watch it again.
Yeah, I think I will.
Because it's one you can honestly watch it 12 times and still not pick everything up.
Yeah, okay. Oh, man.
Yeah, and a lot of, like I was saying before, a lot of stuff that happens in the movie isn't intended to be kind of isn't intended to be explained or be kind of be a part of the story in some sense. Things like the bear being one of them, which is a motif, but is really there to make you uneasy. Same thing with the blood elevators. It's never explained.
Yeah, okay.
And it's kind of just there to make you uneasy, make you unsettled. And it's more of a physical representation of the discomfort that you should be feeling in that moment.
Okay.
And that's what I think Kubrick does really, really effectively throughout the whole film. Is this using visuals to give you a specific emotion, which he does in a lot of his films, but I think really shines through in this one.
Yeah.
And really is a testament to his incredible filmmaking, because that man is so meticulous about how he creates and what he creates that it becomes so specific. And he plans everything out so meticulously.
Yeah. Yeah. Even now that you mentioned that, things like when something happens, it will cut back to Danny's face or something. And he's maybe like, his jaw's dropped or something like that, and eyes are wide open.
Yeah.
I remember that bit towards the end, and yeah, it kind of, that sort of gives me a similar vibe of like, that's just how you're meant to be feeling. Like,
yeah, it's so much more about giving you the emotion you're supposed to be feeling without handing it to you on a silver platter. Yeah. Which he admittedly he is very, very good at.
Yeah.
One thing that and is obviously something that I'm very passionate about is cinematography, which is one of the things that is just such a standout in that movie. In fact, I would argue that everything in that movie is incredible. By no means is it perfect, but I'll be damned if it isn't close.
Yeah.
But the cinematography in that movie gets me every time. That movie has one of my favorite shots of all time. And I wonder if you can figure out what it is, or if you can remember what it is, because I'm sure that it's a shot that, for anyone who's remotely interested in it, leaves an impression.
Is it one of those sort of blood elevator kind of crazy shots?
Kind of. It does. It's like in the middle of the film, sort of. It's right at the start of Jack's descent into madness. Actually, I have two, but I'm thinking of one very particularly.
I don't know.
So it's
when you mention it, I'll like.
Yeah, you'll know exactly which one I'm talking about when I mention it. So my favorite shot from that entire film is the shot of the what's it called, the model of the hedge maze. And how when the camera zooms in to the hedge maze, and then you actually see them walking through the hedge maze.
Yeah.
That is my favorite shot in all of cinema. And it was done in 1980.
What?
Which admittedly is like very close to when Star Wars was released. So like special effects were there, but it's theoretically it's such a simple shot, but it's so effective.
So is that meant to be like, can you actually see the people on that model when they're walking through it, or was that just meant to?
Yeah, like if you're watching it, you can see them walking back and forth in the maze.
Right.
I wish I knew how we did that, because I have no idea. I genuinely don't know.
Yeah. Okay.
Like normally I have an answer to these sort of things. Nah.
Not that one.
Just no, I don't. I've tried to research it, and it all comes up to speculation, because no one knows how he actually did it, and that's what frustrates me. Because with modern films, you can be like, all right, how did they do this shot? And then it's like, oh, they did it this, and this way. But then it's like, oh, it's just Stanley Kubrick did something. Like he's that good of a filmmaker that it's just like he just kind of did it. Yeah. Which is just mental. My second favorite shot in that film is admittedly much simpler, but I love it. Is when Wendy and Danny are outside playing in the snow, and Jack is just staring out the window, blank faced, and it's just a very slow zoom on his face, and it goes just longer than what's comfortable. And it just keeps zooming, and you're just like, and you're just mesmerized by that shot, just looking into his eyes, and you can just see him cracking.
Yeah.
It's just, oh man.
Yeah.
So good.
I remember one like that on Danny, where it zoomed into Danny. I think it was earlier in the film, but yeah, it's kind of just like
Danny does have some very good shots.
Yeah.
Like the one where he sees the twins, and then it cuts to the twins after they were murdered, and then it cuts back, and his shot where he like covers his eyes. Yeah, that whole sequence is so good.
Oh man, yeah, that was insane.
Do you have anything like that with music? I know you talked about kind of The Rising and that sort of thing, but did you have a scene specifically that you think really effectively showcased the music in the film and how it was used? I
don't know. Just so much happened.
Yeah, I know. There's so much going on in that movie.
I guess, like, they used... Going back to the thing where they used a lot of the sort of classic horror sounds in the first half of the film. I kind of didn't expect it to get much bigger. But then towards the end, there was just more things happening. There were more instruments. There was... more production techniques being used, like there was things panned, and oh wow, I was actually listening to it on my monitors, which was cool.
That's the best way for you to watch it, honestly.
Yeah, but yeah, I don't know. It kind of just kept. It was still interesting, even though I thought they'd used all these musical techniques. I thought they sort of outused them at the beginning of the movie, but. Nah.
No.
Just kept getting bigger.
Yeah, and it's so impressive that and it's the same thing with the cinematography in the movie. You think all the tricks in the book are done in the first hour.
Yeah.
But it keeps getting better. And I don't know how he did that.
Yeah, I don't know. Even the acting. The acting blew me away.
Actually, that's a really interesting one, because it's honestly pretty 50-50 split on Shelley Duvall on whether people think she did an incredibly good performance or whether it was really bad.
Yeah, I actually, I don't really know on that one either. I'm a bit iffy.
I think it entirely depends on, because her character is so up for interpretation.
Yeah.
And I think it depends on how you interpret her character. Because there's two different ways you can interpret her character. You can interpret it as this weak, meek, like woman who just wants to please her husband.
Yeah.
And the other, you can also interpret her as an incredibly strong woman who's fighting back against her abusive husband. And I think depending on which view of her you take is going to impact whether you think that she did a good performance. Because I think if you think that she's a meek, weak character, then you're kind of going to think that she's overacting. Whereas if you think that she's fighting back against her abusive husband, then it's a very effective character.
Yeah. So, yeah.
It's interesting, I think, to talk about her character. Because everyone else is very clear cut in terms of, like, Jack is an alcoholic father. Danny is a child. Dick is the well-meaning chef who wants to help. Like, every other character is so clear-cut, but Wendy is not.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, there's not a lot you can say about that. Like,
I don't know,
it's a hard character to talk about because it's so split, and I think it's very much based on the person who views her, how you see her.
Yeah, for sure. I don't know.
Yeah, no.
So I'm not being much help.
No, it's okay. It's like, that is I did kind of spring that one on you. It's a very hard one.
Yeah.
All right. Well, we might move on to my next little point. That was one, by the way.
Oh, cool. Well, even I was just gonna say with Jack's acting towards the beginning, I was kind of sort of when he started to descent into madness. So when they were sort of in the first few weeks of at the hotel, I was a bit like, oh, I don't know, you know, it seems like he went crazy really early. But that was when I was watching it. But then sort of in that argument where they're walking up the stairs and he's like, okay, I'm going to kill you. Then I realized, oh no, he wasn't at that point an hour before. He was.
Yeah. And it's that thing that they teach you in improv is that like, don't start at 100% because you won't be able to top it. And you think that he's reached 100%.
Yeah.
But he hasn't. And there's so much more to go. And he doesn't reach 100%, I feel like, until he's in the maze with Danny.
Yeah.
Because that's like with him shuffling around and like that scene of him yelling completely incomprehensibly is, I feel like his final lapse into like 100%.
Yeah. That sort of brings back the idea of him being sort of becoming an animal.
Exactly.
In that maze. Yeah.
But I think,
with his, so when you said that 127 shots thing in that scene, it blew me away because when I was watching it, I thought they might have done something similar to what they did in, what movie? It, I think it was the remake.
Yeah.
There's a scene towards the end where, the clown, I forgot his name. Pennywise, that's it, jumps out in front of the kids or whatever and scares them. And that's actually the first time that they ever saw that character in makeup. So and you know, their reaction is genuine as well as in character. And I thought that that's what they may have done with that scene as well. I thought
that was the first time Shelley Duvall saw Jack's fully mental character. Yeah, right. I see.
Yeah, and that like she's just genuinely freaking out because like, oh my goodness, this guy might actually kill me.
Yeah.
But no, they clearly wasn't.
127 takes, just incredibly skilled actors.
Yeah.
And that's why Kubrick does that, is because his whole thing was that he wants to push actors to the point where they're no longer acting, where they drop that acting shell and it's just the raw emotions of the scene.
Right. So I guess there's two ways you can do that. It's like first take or 127 takes.
Yeah, which arguably is a kind of a douchey thing to do, but it worked. It obviously worked, and it's a movie that's still talked about today. So obviously he did a good job. One thing that's really interesting is Danny. Danny didn't know he was making a horror movie.
Really?
Yeah. So Danny, interestingly enough, the kid's real name is actually Danny.
I saw that.
His name's Danny Lloyd.
Yeah.
And so he was hired because he was hired for his ability to concentrate for a long time. He was like that was the reason he was hired. Because the character didn't really demand that much of him in terms of acting ability. But because he was a child, Kubrick didn't want to kind of traumatize him, obviously. So Kubrick went to great lengths to make sure that this kid was safe and didn't know he was in a horror movie. Danny Lloyd actually thought he was working on a drama, like a family drama movie, until he actually watched it. And he didn't watch it until he was 16.
Yeah, wow.
Which is just mental.
Yeah.
And like really impressive on their part of keeping this kid safe during a genuinely traumatic movie.
Yeah. I thought, like, I was watching his acting and I was like, this is really well suited to this movie and this style. I was like, this kid's done a really good job, I thought.
Yeah.
At making a horror movie, but he didn't even know. And
arguably that's also Kubrick's direction, being very effective, and helping him a lot.
Yeah.
But yeah, impressive on that kid's part as well. What's kind of sad though is that Danny Lloyd is obviously not a name that we know.
No.
And he didn't get any work after that movie. He finished the movie. He did one more TV movie like a year later, and he stopped acting afterwards. Couldn't get any more work. He tried until he was like 14 to try to get more work, and it just didn't happen for him, which is a bit unfortunate, considering how good he was in The Shining.
Yeah, I wonder if that was because he may have like been going for drama films or things like that, and sort of being like no to horror or no to anything else.
Right, that he may have been in the wrong genre.
Yeah.
That's an interesting way of seeing it, I guess.
I don't know. Yeah, because I looked that up as well and saw that he was only really known for The Shining and nothing
Yeah.
else.
I think he's like an
So-
accountant now or something.
Oh,
Yeah, it's
There you go.
it's strange. So, if you, I'm kind of baiting you with this. If you had to pick one line from the movie to say is iconic, which line would you choose?
is it the one that I know is iconic?
Probably. It's probably that one.
Now I can't remember it. Something about Johnny.
Yes.
Johnny's
the,
here?
the Here's Johnny line.
Here's Johnny. Yeah.
So what's really interesting about that line, you know how I mentioned earlier, actually I don't know if I mentioned this. I'll start here. So Kubrick is very meticulous with his scripts and his writing. However, he's also very trusting of his actors and the people that he chooses to play his characters. And his largest belief is that the actors will always know more about his characters than he does because they spend more time as them. So when he shoots a film, he says to the actors that he is always open to them for improv.
Right.
Um,
And that.
the Here's Johnny line is improv. It's Jack Nicholson improv.
Right.
Which is the second incredibly well-known line that Jack Nicholson has improvised. The first being "You Can't Handle the Truth" from Full Metal Jacket. Full Metal Jacket.
Wow.
Is it that one? I can't remember. It's something like that.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's insane that he just improv that, and it's such an integral part of pop culture.
Yeah. Wow.
Yeah, and I think Jack Nicholson really has a knack for that that form of improv. Because if I remember correctly, he is a method actor in that he stays in character between takes.
Oh, okay. That's actually something I was going to ask.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I think that's his thing.
Because kind of like if I was, acting that, I don't know how I would be that character without being a method actor sort of thing.
Yeah, I think he just stays in character the whole time. Obviously not like murdering people, but like in that headspace, I assume.
Yeah. Yeah.
On a cinematography note, something that's really interesting is in a lot of modern cinema, we use things called Steadicams, which are like vest rigs that go over your shoulders and around your waist, and you like attach an arm to it. And you put a camera on that to kind of stabilize shots as you're chasing people or running down a hallway. So a man named Garrett Brown invented the Steadicam in 1974. And the first movie that it was used in was the horror movie Halloween for its establishing opening shot. The Shining is the first film to use it extensively throughout a film, rather than as like a gimmick that happens once or twice. Right. So The Shining is the first time a film really used the Steadicam, which is a staple of filmmaking in our current day and age. So there's a 2 or 3 minute shot in The Shining, and it happens twice, of Danny on his like tricycle going through the hallways.
Yeah.
And that's done using a Steadicam. With a guy with the Steadicam chasing Danny down the hallway as he's riding his tricycle.
Yeah.
That scene blew minds when it came out because like you couldn't do that. That wasn't a thing that you could do with cameras. It was either on a tripod and panning, or running gun like really shaky footage, which people didn't prefer. Having a shot that could track a person and be so effective at doing so had never been seen in such a mainstream movie before. And it really kind of added to that unsettling feeling of the Overlook Hotel, because it was such a strange thing to see in a film at that time, to be so smoothly gliding through the halls of this hotel.
Yeah. It kind of like gives you the vibe of sort of the Shine following.
Yeah, exactly.
Following you. Yeah,
it's
wow.
really, really strange. And I find that really interesting that that's the first real use of a Steadicam. Speaking of
Yeah.
the halls, did you notice anything weird about the hallways in The Shining?
Should I have noticed anything weird about the hallways in The Shining?
It's not super obvious, but it is if you're paying attention to it.
No, I don't think so.
Okay, so I'm gonna say it, and I think that you'll kind of go like, "Oh, okay, that makes sense." So a couple years ago, someone actually mapped out the halls of the hotel based on like the camera movements and that sort of thing. What's really interesting is that it doesn't make sense. The hallways of the hotel don't match up. They overlap, they go over and under each other, they go through each other, they go diagonally, they go parallel. The halls don't make sense at all. The hotel is constantly moving and shifting throughout the film. Which is, and knowing Stanley Kubrick, it was intentional because there is no way that man let anything slide through his fingers.
Yeah.
But just an incredibly interesting thing to think about is that the hotel is actively moving and disorienting the people in it.
Yeah, but then the characters don't mention that.
No, and
at all.
the characters know how to get everywhere, which is also interesting in its own right, is that while everything's moving and changing around them, they still have that sense of space, which kind of lends itself to that idea that the hotel kind of becomes a part of them.
Right. Yeah, because you see the characters sort of move around and they go to like the same spaces several times in the film. So,
But they come from completely different directions. It doesn't make sense.
yeah.
So that's a really interesting one.
Yeah.
So another interesting thing is that obviously the original book, The Shining, is written by Stephen King, which it's one of his great books. What's interesting is that the movie is entirely different to the book.
Oh, really?
It takes tons of creative liberties, and this is something that Stanley Kubrick does throughout a lot of his films. Is that he doesn't take the source material and turn it into a movie. He takes the idea of the original novel and turns that into a movie. So he makes it his own thing and takes parts that he likes.
Right.
So Stephen King actually wrote an entire script, an entire screenplay for The Shining, and sold it basically. And Kubrick didn't even look at it. Literally didn't look at it. He threw it away. Which is really which is like, and obviously Stephen King didn't like that.
No.
But he'd already sold the rights to it to Stanley Kubrick, so Stanley Kubrick had every right to do what he was doing. So instead, Kubrick worked with this woman named Diane Johnson on the screenplay because he really likes her. He really liked her book, The Shadow Knows, which is a horror. It's a horror detective novel, I think.
Okay.
Apparently, it's very good. But they ended up spending 11 weeks together working on the screenplay for the movie, which ended up being The Shining. But Stephen King has been very outspoken in that he does not like the film, and that he doesn't. It's not an accurate representation of what he wanted and what his vision for The Shining was. Which is interesting because everyone that I've ever known to read the book and watch the movie says that they prefer the movie, and that the book is rather weak and kind of drawn out. So, take it as you will. I take it as you will. I would say that that's impressive on Stanley Kubrick's part. That he can take this movie and make it his own and make it even better than what it originally was.
Yeah, that makes me want to read the book now.
Yeah, it's very long, I think.
Okay.
And Stanley Kubrick called King's writing weak, so...
Wow.
Interesting.
Yeah. That sort of goes back to something we were talking about a few weeks ago, I think, where it's like, who's correct? Is it the audience perspective, the writer's perspective, or so is it Kubrick's perspective? Is it Stephen King's perspective?
Yeah.
Or is it
I think that's
ours, how we see it?
I think that's especially interesting with a movie like The Shining, where everyone's perspective is completely different. Like you could have a room full of people watch that movie and everyone come out with a different idea of how it ended and why it did that and why that happened and blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
which is I've
Yeah.
never had a movie like that.
Yeah.
So I have two more interesting things.
Mm-hmm.
So at the end of the book, at the end of the novel, it ends with the Overlook Hotel burning down, which is
Oh.
how the original story ends.
Okay.
It's a very effective ending, and it signals the end of the hotel, and
Yeah.
its reign of tyranny over all these people. What's interesting is that towards the end of shooting The Shining, a fire actually broke out and destroyed multiple sets. So the rebuild
Oh, no.
of the soundstage costed about $2.5 million.
Whoa.
And there's a really cool picture, and I'll link it in the description, of Stanley Kubrick standing in front of the wreckage and laughing, like full on belly laughing in front of
What?
the wreckage of this set. Because he knows obviously how the novel ends, and this was
Yeah.
towards end of shooting, and he's just pissing himself because he's like, it's
Wow.
like this is exactly what's happening.
Yeah. Wow. Shining in real life.
Yeah, but just super interesting. I have one more little fact, but I'm gonna leave that for when we close.
Okay.
Do you have anything else about the film that you found interesting or want to talk about or want to discuss?
Yeah, well, that was the question I was going to ask, is how the book ended, or if you knew how it ended. And so it's kind of the way that Kubrick's ended it now. It's the way I think is that the house can still wreak havoc next year, sort of thing.
Yeah.
It's not over.
Yes, exactly. Which is why I really recommend you watch the sequel,
Yeah,
Doctor
okay.
Sleep, which kind of answers that question in a very very good way, actually. Because I was rather worried about that film in terms
Yeah.
of how it would stack up to The Shining, because The Shining is obviously this incredible work of film and media.
Yeah.
And then you get a sequel like 40 years later, that has to that has to stand up to the original film. And I can honestly say with full confidence that it does. It really, really does.
Yeah, okay.
They're very different films, but not in a bad way. They have different vibes, but the same. It's like they have the same heart, but different bodies is the easiest way to describe it. But it gives a lot of context to the original film, and it kind of continues the story. The Doctor Sleep continues the story of Danny, but like 30 years later. So Danny's an adult and is
Oh, right.
dealing. He kind of deals with The Shining, and he has all of the things from the hotel. So like the lady in the bath and that sort of thing all follow Danny, and come with him out of the hotel. It kind of catalogs him dealing with that and how he deals with that and how he goes about his life. And then a whole lot of other stuff happens, and it expands on the universe in ways that I cannot explain to you, because it'll give it away. And it makes the movie so much worse because it's one of those movies where you don't know who's right and who's wrong until the very end.
Right.
So would really recommend it.
Yeah, that'll definitely be my homework for this week.
Yeah,
That just reminded me of a part of the movie where, the first one, where he sees the lady in the bath. Do you care to explain?
do I care to explain? So, there's a lot of theories about all of those people in the hotel. The easiest one, and the one that I kind of subscribe to, is that all of the people in the hotel are people that have died there.
Okay.
So
That's sort of what I was thinking.
yeah, so the butler is the guy that killed his kids and blew his brains out with a shotgun. The lady in the bath, you can assume, is someone who killed herself in a bathtub. What other people are there? The twins are obviously the guy's daughters.
Yeah.
Who else? There's more.
Well, there's the whole party of people.
Yeah, there's the whole party. There's just heaps of people. You can assume that all of these people are people that have died in the hotel, for a whole range of reasons.
Yeah.
So that's kind of the easiest way for me to think about it, at least.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
Fair enough.
But yeah, it's an incredible film. I don't think that anyone has gotten to the end of this podcast without having seen the film, because otherwise you would have no idea what the fuck we're talking about.
Yeah.
If you haven't though, and if you have made it to the end, I would recommend that you go and watch the film.
Yes.
It is.
I actually did not even realize we're at the end. That was just too easy to talk about.
That's what I mean. There's so much to talk about with this movie. It's crazy. And honestly, I could so easily go for another hour.
Yeah, we might have a part 2 in the future.
We'll actually probably talk about Doctor Sleep next week. And we'll come back to The Shining with that as well, because I have a lot of really interesting things to talk about with that. Do you have any final things you want to ask or say about The Shining, or?
Oh, I don't know. Could probably be here for hours.
Probably.
No, I don't know. It was just looking back at it. It's really well put together, and it just blew my mind in ways like I've never seen films do things like that.
It's a movie that you have to just let happen.
Yeah. No, it blew my mind. It was great.
All right. Would recommend. I have one last thing that I want to finish on.
Yeah.
Which is arguably the craziest fact about this whole movie. So obviously, The Shining breeds a whole. It's just a breeding ground for theories and fan theories and ideas and just things to think about. And obviously, people want places for all of these ideas to culminate and have somewhere where they can come back to and read and blah blah blah. Yeah. And there is a fan site for The Shining.
Ooh.
I think it's called the Overlook Hotel. So yeah, it's. I'm just trying to find the link now, but no, I can't find it super easily. It's called Room 2. There's a documentary about the film called Room 237.
And
then there's the website called theoverlookhotel.com, which is all of the a lot of information compiled into one website. What's interesting about this website is that it's run by a very famous director. Well, very famous. A director of a very well-known film. And it's not it's not one that you would expect. I'm not going to ask you to guess the movie. Would you like to guess the genre of the film that this man directed?
Well, if we're talking about horror, it's probably comedy?
Comedy, interesting. So, the overlookhotel.com, the fan site where all of this information is compiled and kept together, is actually run by the director of Toy Story 3.
What? What the heck?
Which is, I think, is just incredible. I think that's a great thing to end on. His name is Lee Unkrich, Leeunkrich.
Right.
And he's just always been obsessed with The Shining, so he runs this website devoted to the film, which is interesting. He also provided a lot of funds for the documentary Room 237, so he was rather involved in the funding for that movie.
Wow, that's crazy.
We should probably bring it to a close because we could honestly keep talking about this movie forever.
Yeah, we could.
Such a good movie, incredible. So many layers to it.
Yeah.
And it's worth a rewatch. It's worth a third 100%. Watch, fourth watch, fifth watch. There's layers upon layers upon layers, and you can honestly unpack it forever. Which you can see that people have and are still doing 40 years after this movie came out. Which is just a testament to how well it's put together.
Yeah.
Anyway, would recommend. Please watch it. If you don't, you'll make me sad. All right, Let's end it. Thank you so much for listening to this episode of The Fro Show. This episode didn't have a lot going on visually, but if you would like to see our faces as we talk, go to the YouTube show, The Fro Show on YouTube, where you can find our lovely faces talking as faces do, I guess. Either way, nice. This was a lot more of a chill episode. I actually rather liked it. It was nice for this week, and I think it was perfect for the juxtaposition between that and what The Shining is. So if you come straight from The Shining to here, it'll be a good little cool down for you.
Yeah.
Anyway, thank you so much for watching. We hope you all have an incredible week, and we'll see you next week. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.